All right, welcome to another lecture slash prompt discussion for 1060. What we want to do is talk about the next assignment that's coming up, and this is in preparation for your essay 4. And what we're going to do, if you haven't done one in previous classes, is an annotated bibliography. It's going to be due in Blackboard, obviously, Monday, March 30th, 2015, 8 p.m. as always. And again, I can only submit, and I haven't had any problems with this class so far as I remember, with the file types. Everyone's submitting the proper file types. So what your assignment is, whoops, went a little bit too far down. What you're going to do with the annotated bibliography, it will consist of at least 10 works, and you probably shouldn't, go more than that for this assignment, from scholarly sources as always. Each source must be from legitimate journals, periodicals, books, well-established authors, so forth. The majority of your sources should be earlier than 15 years old, unless the source is from an accepted expert in the field. So again, I'm looking for, mostly recent sources, but unlike Essay 3, you can have a lot of leeway if there have been very important books that have come out beyond the 2000s. So definitely you have a lot more leeway with time. Again, you really want to go for those expert fields, and you always want to get as modern as possible, as we discussed, but it's not going to be such a stringent this case. As always, again, don't use dictionaries, encyclopedias, Wikipedia, right? Any other non-expert source. Definitely review the homework if you haven't, because the one homework we had with the, determine if these were legitimate sources. A few people, didn't recognize how, in the academic setting, all those sources don't really count, even though they're very deceptive. And again, all those three sources previous students used and didn't even realize, because they weren't paying attention to the actual source itself. So always be careful with that. So for each work, in terms of the annotation, for each source, you must apply at least 2 full-length paragraphs. The first paragraph will actually be your annotation. This is when you summarize the source, right? You summarize the major points of the argument. In the second paragraph, you're just going to reveal how you use this source to strengthen your thesis, right? How is it going to help you out in the paper itself. So the annotation paragraph, or paragraphs, should be around 200 to 300 words and should flow like a regular paragraph. It's not a bullet point list, and I'll show you an example in a moment of an annotation. Your paragraphs should be and must be cohesive summaries. For example, you shouldn't include important quotes in your annotations, but again, don't simply place a dangling quote in your paragraph. Have specific detail, have those signal phrases, right? You should discuss the claims and evidence. You shouldn't just summarize the argument. You should also look at the claims and evidence. Everything that you would need to include for your essay 4, right? So the second paragraph, that source paragraph, will discuss how you use the source itself, right? This one should be around 100 to 150 words. And so here's what you want to think about, right? How will the source help prove your argument? What what subtopic will it connect to? How will it advance your thesis? Where in the essay would you use it? Would you use it in the beginning, middle, end, what have you? So this is what we're going to do for the annotation in this class. Now, the research you conduct should be for your research project, and so just as a reminder, I placed the project prompt here as well. So the research project will consist of 10 to 12 pages. Your topic is to argue why your major matters, right, and why any university should offer your major. You will need to establish the legitimacy of the field, right, show how it is a field of study, which is where your research comes in for, again, your annotated bibliography. The research, research the history of the field, research famous and influential people within the field, note their contributions, feel free to, of course, interview people, workers in the field, teachers, anyone you may know, consider this a good kind of networking, opportunity as well if you know people who are in the field. Right? If you're undeclared, and I don't think we have any undeclared, but just in case, right, if you're undeclared, you should argue just simply why universities should offer that option, right? Increasingly, as we'll discuss during our business writing section, increasingly people are going to schools for a specific job, even though I always say that's ridiculous, because if you're 18, do you really know what you want to do for the rest of your life? Most of us aren't that lucky. So, there is a reason why universities should allow, a greater exposure to gen eds and all sorts of things. So, if you are undeclared, or if you just want to kind of look at this as an argument, your research should focus on why universities exist, right, and how they help, right? So, hold on, I lost my, there we go, lost my arrow there. So, for the grading scale, right, Pretty straightforward. So 0 to 20 points, I'm looking for the strength of your sources, right? Legitimate, relevant sources, right? 20 points goes for a variety, right? There should be a good mix of books, articles, other important sources, as I said, like interviews, or periodicals, depending on what type of major. 0 to 20 points for the annotation paragraph itself. Again, I'm looking for cohesive paragraphs that contain clear summaries of the arguments and evidence, and that's crucial too, the evidence. Provide specific details and support, concerning the author's claims. And again, well-constructed paragraphs that flow properly. Again, this isn't a bullet list. The source paragraphs, again, just strong sense of how you will incorporate the source and how you will defend your overall claims. And then 10 points on grammar, of course, always important for any assignment. And then, of course, 10 points for proper format. And I'll get to the format now. So, as always, everything should be in Times New Roman 12-point font, 1 is margins. Of course, in this case, obviously, you have to choose between MLA and APA. So you follow the end text, what we always call, works cited or reference, citations. However, you keep everything single spaced. So unlike your essays, which are always double spaced, this one is single spaced. So you want to bold each citation. Make sure you follow proper alphabetical order. Paragraph 1 again summarizes the article's main points. Paragraph 2 describes how you will, again, incorporate this material into your paper. The purpose of an annotated bibliography is to help you have a working start to your research project. Ideally, you should pretty much be able to transport and expand almost both paragraphs directly into your actual essay. So when students do this correctly, they already have about 5 pages, because again, everything's single spaced and you're annotating 10 works. So a lot of times students, if they do this correctly and if they give themselves enough time to do this project correctly, you already are halfway done with your research project. So again, this is not busy work. This is, always consider this, like any major assignment. There is a purpose, behind any of these exercises. So I gave you one example. Now this is, of course, note that it's an MLA format, but just to show you, everything is in. We got a question here. Everything is in single space. Yeah, Adam. Yeah, let me pause it for a second. Okay, so here again, I pulled this example from a student. So we have, again, it's an MLA format, so make a note of that, right? If you do an APA, it would look different, but we use the works cited. We have the last name, comma, first name, period. We have the article in quotes, period, in before the quotes. We have the journal, we have the volume and issue number, the year, and the page numbers. And so just, briefly, I'll read to you, his annotation. So this is the first paragraph. College degrees are valuable in different ways, ranging from the degree itself to the institution from which it was obtained. Additionally, the idea that liberal arts degrees are necessarily less profitable than technical degrees fails to take a longer-term view, as the numerous creative skills earned from such a degree mean that the salary of someone with a liberal arts degree who has been working for a decade is much higher than one might assume. Right? That could, again, be a little bit more specific. Even if the initial salary cannot compare to that of the technical degree. Again, I would have preferred more specificity. Finally, students have only begun going to college in hopes of obtaining a better job. As recent as 2005, and this is a good detail point, as recent as 2005, the dominant reason to attend college was to study interesting subjects. However, each year after, students more and more admit that they attend school solely to obtain a better job. Again, there is the mid-section that I think could be a little bit more specific. If we just go back up to the top and talk about this, I think these kind of ideas could be fleshed out a bit and expanded upon, just one or two more sentences. But it's a good annotation. And I clearly know what this article is about. From reading this annotation, you should have a good idea of what this article is about, and note how it is. It's a full paragraph, a well-developed full paragraph. And look at the second one. So the fact that liberal arts degrees have a higher earning potential than most people realize helps to justify their inclusion in the overall college curriculum, right? Good, clear argument. That's an excellent topic sentence right there, right? Most importantly, the valuable creative skills learned from such courses, such as writing and logic, explains why liberal arts courses are part of a general education degree. So again, this person is giving me good, clear argumentations. I like the source paragraph a lot, because again, note how it's just in really 2 sentences, but we have good, clear ideas of how the student is going to argue this topic. So obviously, if you have any questions, always email. Remember that if it's late, it loses 10 points, and if you need an alternate formats, obviously contact the Accessibility Resource Center.